All right, we'll go ahead and convene our work session of the Laramie City Council for April 26, 2022. We'll go to public comment on non-agenda items, non-work session related items. And open the floor for items that we're not discussing in our work session. Seeing none. Close the public comment. As Councilor Schuster suggests, we'll turn over the meeting to the city manager to get us started and tell us where we need to be, maybe in our documents and the rest of those.
Hi, Council. Good evening. We did put an agenda out with page number references, and the city clerk will be able to project the budget document so we can all follow along. As Nancy kind of cues us up to the first page, which would be page 5 of your capital budget workbook, I thought I would open up this evening with some questions and answer. I understand that we had our last work session on capital construction projects, a week and a half ago? And so I thought it'd be good to start off with any questions that you might have, either from that session or if you've had an opportunity to look into the materials more deeply and have any questions that you'd like to pose before we start off. Tonight, we do intend to go over enterprise fund, capital construction, fleet, and capital maintenance. And as you know, last time we looked at our governmental funds, which included the general fund, the recreation center fund, and the capital construction fund. So, any questions?
City Manager, my question for you is, we talked about an opportunity for amendments and how that may be set for discussion at a future meeting. And so I would ask folks to if they have those or they see something where they would want to put that amendment in, keep track of it and remember that depending on the number, I think it's fair to say, City Manager, of those that we might be looking at, we may look at those in another meeting, or if there aren't a bunch, we might fit them into a meeting that's already scheduled. Maybe
that is correct, Mayor. So yes, I believe that tonight we will probably get through the entirety of the capital budget. The budget staff tomorrow will send out the amendment worksheets for you all and give you a due date for those, leading up to your special meeting on May 10th, which you've already scheduled. And that special meeting is the council's opportunity to modify or amend the capital construction budget.
Yep. Just kind of a recap for people. I don't see any other questions, City Manager, so maybe we'll move to the next part of your presentation.
Okay, sounds good. So we're starting off, councilors. We're starting off on page 5, just in some of the general overview materials. Thought that would be a good place for us to begin. You did look at many of these pages at the last work session, but we were focused mostly, but not entirely, mostly on the governmental fund capital projects. As noted in the right-hand column at the bottom of page 5, tonight we're talking about our proprietary funds or our enterprise funds. Those two words are sort of interchangeable for this section of the city's business activities. And that's what we do in these funds, is we account for the activities of the city that are very business-like in nature, where we're charging fees and operating utilities for water and wastewater and for solid waste management on behalf of the community. The difference, of course, with enterprise funds or proprietary funds is that we are charging only the amount that we need to operate the funds, and what differentiates us from private utilities is that we don't have to make a profit. We simply reinvest in the operation of the fund with the user fees that we charge to the community. On page 6, also in the lower right-hand column, you'll note that City Council goals are always part of the consideration that we make as we review and I ultimately recommend the budget to you. At the bottom of page 6 there, you'll see the 2020 goals relative to infrastructure. And if you'll scroll to the next page, City Clerk, page 7, you'll see that we showed not only the 22 goals for the current year, but the 21 goals that we've just completed. And of course, in both of those years, your goal D, milestone number 4, was consistent across both years to continue the major investments that we're making into water and sewer improvements in order to facilitate community growth. And you'll see that goal carried through as we look at some of the detail of the projects for the rest of this work session. If you're ready to skip forward to page 29, as the clerk does that, I'm happy to take any general questions on proprietary or enterprise funds.
Does anybody have any questions?
Page.
I don't know. Sorry, City Manager. The last time I tried to say, just go ahead and ask questions, but people weren't super comfortable with that, and they kind of wanted to. So we'll just play it by ear. I don't see any questions.
Okay, thank you. So Council, this page would look familiar to you. This shows all of the capital investments and construction that's planned for the upcoming biennium across every fund. Of course, we looked at this page at the last work session as it pertained to our governmental funds. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on water, wastewater, and solid waste, and those are about halfway down the right-hand column. You'll see them right in the middle there. In total, this chart shows what we expect to expend or what we're recommending be expended. For instance, for water, a recommended total infrastructure investment of $41,478,369. Looking back across that row, about $15,076,738 of that $41 million we expect to come from grants or contributions. Then you'll see the loan or lease amount reflected there at $4.5 million, and then from reserves or from revenue, $21,835,446. The water line also shows the total recommended expenditure, which is $28,769,775, broken down into grant and other categories. And then in the row below that, solid waste, you see the total recommended expenditure is $2,472,830. So tonight, our conversation will look at about $75 million of planned investments into the community in these enterprise business fund areas. Next page. I'm not going to spend too much time on this chart, and of course last time we did look at this as well. This shows all of our planned construction activities for governmental and enterprise funds and shows them by year so that you can understand this. This chart spans 2 pages but shows them kind of by year so that you can see the progression in time of how these projects will be executed, and then that tying to the timing of the expenditure within your actual budget. And of course, when we looked at this chart last time, Council, as you know, we did kind of conversation went into some of the enterprise fund projects, particularly some of the notable large ones that are coinciding with street projects largely. So we can certainly touch on those again tonight in some detail, but obviously we did talk about them a little bit last time. Hard to tease the governmental and the enterprise activities completely apart. So with that, Nancy, I think we can probably just scroll forward to the water fund section of the budget, which is page 110. Council, this will take us into the detail of the fund budgeting and away from that general section. Again, I invite general or specific questions as we move through these areas.
I
mentioned that we do have Malia. Oh, sure, Councilor Doherty, yeah.
I think because last week I clicked on something and it linked. Does this still have the hyperlinks within the document so that newer counselors know that, like, does it jump can you click on things to jump down to the specific page where that item is given in detail, like the stuff just before,
Yes.
the page before this? Yeah, so this is still linked like it was before. I love that. Thank you. I love this whole chart.
Yeah,
Jen,
absolutely.
we saw you there.
If you're following along in your digital document, Jennifer, I'm sure, was going to tell you that they did embed those links, so you can jump to the detail pages from the more general project description pages.
Very handy way to do it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks to Jennifer Wade and her team for doing that. And it does make a digital review of the budget so much easier. So thank you. We used to include page number references, but the digital version is handy to do the paging for you. And that's actually what I was going to do, is mention that we do have Malia Brown with us. She's our Chief Operating Officer. Jennifer Wade working with Malia on the budget and the budget team. Jennifer is our Administrative Services Director. And then we've got a host of folks from Public Works, our city engineer, Eric Japp, and Brooks Webb, who's the Public Works Director, and they can help answer questions and fill in any gaps as we take a look at the recommended budget. So on page 110, this is the start of the water fund. And as with the governmental funds that we looked at last time, the first thing you see on these pages is our fleet, vehicle, and equipment recommendations. I'll remind you what I said last time, which is that we have deferred some replacement of vehicles and large equipment for a number of years. And so in this biennium budget that you're reviewing, you see what I would characterize as maybe an unusual amount of investment into vehicles and equipment, but that is due to deferred maintenance over the past few years. In the water fund, there's really not a lot, actually. We're looking at about $1.5 million, and that includes this biennium and the subsequent biennium. So you're looking 2 bienniums out through the end of fiscal 26. So while I make that statement generally that we're making a large fleet and equipment investment, that probably doesn't hold as true for the water fund specifically. You can see at the bottom of the page, if you're interested, the specifics on each of the vehicle replacements, and I would reiterate that each of these are replacing vehicles. There's no new vehicles recommended for the water. Next page, please. As you look at equipment replacements, again, all replacement items reflecting, you can see 2 backhoes, an excavator, a skid steer, a trailer, and a dump truck, all needing to be replaced.
And I think
so
we
if there
heard,
are no questions on...
No, City Manager, I was just going to say, I think we heard quite a little bit of a individual rundown of those at the previous discussion. We had some questions answered, so I think we all appreciated being able to have that preview, and it's probably answered some of the other questions that we might have asked tonight. Anyway, please go on.
Right, absolutely. So as we look at the rest of page 111, now we're really getting into the projects. And as I said, we did cover some of the larger projects a bit last time, so I won't dwell on those. As you look, I'm just going to start at the top in the meter division. You can see we have some planned meter vault installation and replacement. We'll be continuing that work. This is something we do on a really ongoing basis and rebudgeting a small amount of funds there. When you get into pumps and wells, you will see projects that you are familiar with, either from just your knowledge of the last few years, but also our conversation a few weeks ago. The notable project I would draw your attention to in the pumps and wells section of the water operation is the 41T3 well piping and treatment. As we scroll down to the next page, we'll be looking at the money for actually drilling the well, which, as you know, has been a planned expense and, in fact, was occurring this weekend. But what we're planning for here is the connections, the piping and the treatment that will connect that well into the water system. And that's a very significant expenditure, which of course is why I draw it to your attention at roughly $7 million. And again, this was planned, so you see it in the gray rebudgeting column with no funds out into future years. But as you know, the project was slightly delayed. We had hoped to have the well drilled a few years ago and connected probably this year and the previous, but we are a few years behind due to the delays. And so we'll be expending that $2.7 million, I suspect, in the upcoming year or two. As you scroll down, if there are any questions in those first two sections, pumps and wells or meters, I'm happy to take those now. But for my part, I will move on unless I see Fred turned his camera on. Did you have a question, Fred? Nope. Okay.
I just didn't want my blowing my nose on camera.
Right. There are times when you need to turn the camera off for a second, for sure. Okay, as we scroll down into the next section here, you'll see a couple of those projects that are big, big, big high-dollar projects, notably the Northside Tank Project, which is the first listed under this next section here. We did talk about it last time. I think Council understand that, but it's a very significant expenditure, the largest project we've done in the Water Fund in many, many, many years at $15.5 million, a very significant portion of which is funded through grants.
Are you going to cover the main water mainlining project? That looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. Maybe I'll let city engineer and public works director talk about that.
Hi, Council. Good evening, Council. Yeah, the water main lining project. You know, we do a lot of lining projects on our sanitary sewer. This project is for water lines that are going under infrastructure that is very important. So we have some water mains that run under Highway 287, under the railroad, under the airport runway, and lining those gives some extra protection from water breaks. And so this was something that was identified by our Homeland Security evaluation a couple of years ago. And that this, you know, if we had a water line break in any of these, where this major infrastructure is, it would be a huge negative economic impact on the community. So this project spans over a few years. You can see going out 24 through 26, and but that's basically what it is just to line those for extra protection underneath critical infrastructure.
Thank you. That's very cool.
Any other questions, Council, as take a look down those projects?
I have a question while Brooks is here, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor, and you can just stay off. I'm just going to assume you say yes. Brooks, is that Wyoming Street or Wyoming Avenue water line project, is that just the section we're paving, or is that the entirety of Wyoming Avenue?
Yeah, Councilor Harrington, through you, Mayor. There's a section throughout the project. It's not the entire length. There's a section that needs to be basically upsized and connected that runs underneath that project boundary. And so, yeah, that's what that's for. It is part of that same project with the paving and the storm drainage on Wyoming.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions. And as I said, Wyoming is a great example of areas where we talked about the street work, and now you're starting to see the underground work in that enterprise fund. You're going to see that with Bill Nye as well as we kind of pull down there. You know, before we move, oh no, we're moving on to transmission. Excuse me. So I mentioned the Northside Tank and Transmission Line project as being really significant in terms of expense and also scope of the project. 3rd Street utility rehabilitation for water lines, that also in the next row down is a pretty significant expenditure at $6.7 million. This is work that you're starting to see underway actually in 3rd Street right now. We had some good staff conversation today about 3rd Street work starting to occur, and this is kind of in front of the old Kmart building on North 3rd Street there in the vicinity of the Harney crossover. Brooks, do you have any updates for us? What's the end of this project? Do we know? Estimated completion date?
Yeah, city manager, it's fall, in the fall. I mean, as we carry down 3rd Street, it's a huge project. And then as we go along, we're also replacing all the service lines into every building. Yeah, completion date is in the late fall. We're only, as we move along, we're only allowing the contractor to shut down 3 blocks at a time. And then for Jubilee days, there'll be a stop work during Jubilee days. So they'll be out of the way and 3rd will be open. But yeah, it's going to be kind of a mess over there this summer. But as you know, we need to get the work done before YDOT comes in to do their asphalt rehabilitation project on 3rd Street.
I have a little bit of a follow-up with that.
Absolutely.
I see that Chief Operating Officer's got a hand raised, so let's see what Malia has to say. Go ahead, Malia.
Thank you, Council. I just wanted to update, and maybe Brooks would like to jump in. We got the bid for the North Tank today. It is quite over the price that we have. The bid was 3-1 with the contingency and some of the design that's happening. We're looking at like a $6 million add on this project. And why I'm saying this is because we also had bad news yesterday, which I hadn't been able to talk to Janine about also, with the Bill Nye. The YDOT came in with our number, which was 4.2 above, which is what our match was above the USAC match and things going on. Now it's 11 million. And so I haven't seen Brooks that much. I was in training today, but basically we're seeing if we can go get the state to help us with the North Tank and maybe get a loan grant and up the loan grant piece on that project. The USAC, we're thinking maybe look at the critical infrastructure bill. That might help. If not, we might have to scope the project down. So I guess we also had this on 3rd Street. So what we're seeing is bids coming in that are really, really over. And I think that, I guess I will say the amendments are going to be really hard unless we do something that says we're going to take something away. And I just wanted to make that a statement. Since we're going over the North Tank and Brooks may have some more information.
Yeah,
Sorry for the bad news.
Yeah, I'll just add. Yeah, the North Tank project. It was pretty disheartening today when the bids came in on it. Our consultant, our design consultant, is currently going over all those bid tabs to ensure all the bidding was correct. And then after that point, we'll approach the funding agencies and see what we can do there. I will tell you the funding agencies have had this happen recently on other projects. So I don't know that it was a huge surprise to them. It was a big surprise to me on how far over it was. And a big part of that expense is the pipe prices are just through the roof. I mean, this is the North Tank project is 24-inch pipe that runs a really long, over 1.5 miles, and the pipe alone was about $4 million on the project.
Thank you, Brooks. I've got hands popping up all over the place, of course, because we're in one of those topics that's going to generate questions. Councilmember Gabriel.
Brooks, I was curious about the light situation at Flint with YDOT and the water project, what kind of impact that might have.
Yeah, Councilor Gabriel, through you, Mayor, we're coordinating with YDOT on that, and our plan is one of the reasons we're there now with our water project is so that we can be out of the way when they get in there to do the traffic signal light project. They received their bids. YDOT received their bids on that project, and on that agreement, we had with them, we had $130,000 in the budget for our portion, which is the street portion. Our portion is now $160,000. So you'll see next week on your agenda, we will have a budget amendment for $30,000 to get that project done. But as far as our water project and their street signal project, we're working with them, coordinating with them, and we're hoping we're going to be out of the way before they get in there.
Thank you.
Councilmember Harrington.
Mr. Mayor, if you wanted to ask your question, that would be okay. I'm happy to wait for a minute.
All right. My question was well, I had two questions. So sorry, Councilmember Harrington, you're going to wait just a second. Mr. Webb, the 3rd Street project, like you mentioned, that's a huge project and it's complicated and you're doing it, we're working to get it done in chunks at a time and segments. You talked about the shutdown for Jubilee Days. That makes sense for obvious reasons. I'm just wondering what we think logistically is going to be the toughest period for that. I'm thinking it's when we hit Grand Avenue and that 3-block chunk where we're going to have the logistics issues of getting the traffic moved around town. Does that match with what your assessments are as well and the city engineers?
Mayor, I completely agree. And we had those discussions in the office today about when we hit Grand and what that's going to look like. And our project manager is working with the contractor, and I know they're already talking about what happens when we move down into this section. It's going to be tough through there, and we're going to have to get creative with the traffic control and the detouring. It's with running the service lines to all the buildings, the new service lines. We're running across 3rd Street, so there's not even the possibility to have a lane open on 3rd Street just because of all the crossings that are happening there and all the work that's happening. So, yeah, I'll just say we are looking really close at when we get down in the downtown area right around Grand. That's going to be a tough spot.
And I hate to do it to you, but you know what I'm going to say next probably, which is when do we think this part of the project rolls out? I don't have to. If you're not comfortable guessing, don't. But
at this point, I'm not real comfortable guessing.
Fair. That's fine.
Yeah, I think as we move along, we'll know better. But I think right now it's too soon to tell.
Fair enough. I'll just get straight to the point on that. I sure hope it isn't late August. So whatever can be done.
Understood.
All right. My other question was for Malia, and Malia, you touched on this just briefly, but I think it's really important. So I wonder if you might add just anything else to it, which is that when do we think we'll have some sense of whether or not the federal infrastructure dollars might be available to us to help backfill these accelerating costs and these serious and very important infrastructure projects? When do we anticipate we might have an answer on some of that?
I don't know on Bill Nye, the reason why it's not till 24, so we have some time. So that's why I think it's a good project to go after critical infrastructure dollars. I don't think they have the rules out yet. I know, Sarah, I think that the city manager is looking at that, what's going on, but I believe because of the project timeline that would be a good one to see if we could do something with. But we just found out this yesterday, so late yesterday. So basically, this YDOT said, hey, here's what your new cost is. It's, how $7 billion over what we had before. So we're going to have to do something. If it doesn't qualify for infrastructure, then we're going to have to maybe scope the project back.
So we're at the mercy of whenever they promulgate their rules around that, and that could be. I don't know. I don't even know how to guess around timelines for that. I see that Jen Waite's turned her camera on. Do you want to add to that answer? Thanks, Malia.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. I would just add that the federal funding, our ability to access it will likely come in phases, which I'm sure you are all aware of, but I would just add that to the discussion. We should have some clarity about the state pass-through of American Rescue Plan funds, which were legislated and approved within a month or two. It will be sooner, but then there's the other infrastructure package that will come a little bit later. So there's going to be some uncertainty for a period of time while we piece this together. And like Malia said, the city manager is working with Sarah Reese to really vet out those multiple waves of federal funding that will likely come our way.
Thank you. And I think you just pointed out something that's also important for this discussion, is that there are two potential pools to tap into for some resources for these projects. So that's good news. And how they can be applied and so forth. We know that you all on the staff will be keeping a sharp eye out for those things, and then let us know as they develop. And I just wanted to cover that a little bit more, because honestly, there are very few straws that we can grasp at to quell some of our anxiety around costs, but those are two fairly large ones that I think we need to kind of keep in mind as we consider these price increase challenges. I don't know, it's probably not going to solve all of our problems, right? Nothing ever does, but it might help significantly. So I think it's worth talking about that a little bit, so that it's not all gray clouds on the horizon. Councilmember, and I bet you wish you hadn't waited for me to ask my questions. Go right ahead.
Mayor, I don't mind at all. I was curious, excuse me, as we're talking about Bill Nye, as we're sort of like looking at potentially scaling back, is there, there's a chance I'm misunderstanding the plan for Bill Nye as it goes through sort of that to Corthell section and then on to Connect again. But is that planned as sort of like a separated street at that point? Is it with sort of an island or green space in the middle? And then I guess my question would be, can we look at the cost savings of keeping it as similar to Grand Avenue, where it's a 4-lane road, and see if that's somewhere that we could make back some of that increased cost?
So, through you, Mayor, Councilor Harrington, a couple of things. We talked last time a little bit about the street treatment, and for Bill Nye, the medians will not be planted, but they are planned to be constructed. In addition, we talked about pedestrian access on the north side, sidewalk, etc. And we have, since talking with you all about this at the last work session, Assistant City Manager submitted, I believe, a statement of intent to apply for TAP grant, and we reprioritized our pedestrian pathway monies to pursue a TAP grant for that pedestrian path on the north side of this road. To your other question, I think what I hear you saying is, could we scope it back so that it doesn't have the median treatment in the middle and be just a 4-lane? And we would need to talk to YDOT, and in terms of the engineering piece, Public Works might want to weigh in. But the thing that I would leave with you is the reason that we have the center medians in Grand Avenue and would have them in this roadway is our comprehensive plan calls for it, for a roadway of this nature. So as you see on Grand Avenue, when that road was designed to be improved, we put the medians where they were able to fit, frankly, in keeping with our comprehensive plan guidelines that the city has adopted. And then there were other areas of Grand Avenue where they weren't able to fit, and that's where we had to scope them down, neck them down along the University of Wyoming campus. Bill Nye would be a different situation. There's not a lack of right-of-way width there, and so if we adhere to our comp plan, we would leave those in place. But again, construct them, but maybe not plant them right away.
Can I ask a follow-up, Mayor? Mm-hmm. So I think that's great, Janine, and personally, I do kind of enjoy the aesthetics of an island, and having that green space, planted or not initially. I guess maybe I would be curious, and I know that they're planned for 3rd Street when that project is completed as well. So I can see the value in sort of the cohesive nature throughout town. I'm wondering if there would be places where it would make sense, and I don't know what the cost savings would be, but if there would be places that might make sense to sort of have those come and go, as they do on Grand Avenue, as they will on 3rd Street, where they enter like places of higher pedestrian traffic. Next to the high school occurs to me as a place that may have higher pedestrian traffic. When you sort of look at the map, there's places that the housing developments into the future may make more sense to have, there may be higher pedestrian traffic at that point, and having that sort of spot of safety in the middle may make it a little more pedestrian friendly. So I guess maybe I would just ask Public Works to look into that and see if that's an option. It may not be, but I guess just as a place for us to maybe save money. And then just as a closing thought, I do appreciate staff looking at that pedestrian pathway, funding it through a different means. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And duly noted, I think, for Public Works, I would mention, you're absolutely right, Councillor Harrington, that the center medians, they also can create pedestrian refuge at intersections so that people can kind of cross halfway and have refuge and then cross the other halfway. Brooks, looks like you wanted to add something there.
Yeah, if I could, I was just going to add that we've been working on this a long time, and we've had all those conversations with YDOT, and actually the 11 million now that we're looking at that Malia referred to has the medians completely removed from the project. Those were an added expense, and so I mean what we have designed out there right now is this 11 million is basically the roadway.
Thanks, Brooks. That's good to know for sure.
Appreciate you added that in there. I was just about to ask if medians and things like that were the types of things we might think about trimming, but the reality is even starker than that. Go ahead, Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious. I mean, I'm clearly things like pipe increasing in value has got to be related to supply out there in the market, not only providing it, but also the large number of projects that we're expecting over the next decade. Has there been any analysis from YDOT or UW or anyone in the state that maybe these price volatility might settle down? Is delaying a project by a year something we should be considering? Because we're expecting things to go faster. Are there ARPA things that we're looking into? Granted, I know you guys have had this for a couple of hours to look at, and I'm not expecting miracles or full answers, but I'm curious if there's resources out there for us to find out information like this.
I'll jump in first, Councillor Schmeckel. As we talked about at the last work session, we're seeing this price escalation all across, not only just construction projects, but just everything, toilet paper, right, and pipe and everything. So this is going to, I believe, be a pervasive issue as we deal with our budget, not only right now reviewing and adopting a budget for the upcoming year, but we need to be poised as well to likely make a lot of amendments to budget. I wanted to share with you, I was on a conference call last week with the Regional City Managers Association, and one of my colleagues in North Dakota shared that they had $1 million project that came in $1 million over budget. So this is pervasive. The association, which includes North, South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, all of my colleagues are experiencing this in this region, and it's an issue across the country. To whether anyone's done any analysis on whether we wait or not, I'm not sure that we have any solid analysis to rely on. I can share with you my own experience when the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was passed in 2007 and 8, which was a similar situation only in the respect that there was significant federal dollars allocated for investments into infrastructure, and there wasn't a pandemic. There weren't quite the supply chain issues, but there was a Great Recession, right? So kind of similar circumstances. But we saw price escalation at that time as well. And so I don't know what it is about when the government, whether it's federal, local, state, makes investments, but we see prices go up. Right now, that's exacerbated, obviously, by supply chain issues, and when those will free up, we don't know. So that's the kind of analysis that I think we have to make and be ready to come back to you and say, okay, we need to say forge forward with finding $7 million to make this project happen, or no, we think this is one that we would gamble on. And Brooks mentioned they're reviewing the bid tabs. That's where they'll start to understand what aspects of the project are most over, if it's pipe or if it's labor or other things.
Probably has something to do with just generating that much more demand across the board. I can't help but imagine there's all kinds of cities that have continued to delay projects and try to find a right time. And then when there's those funding sources to tap into, there's kind of a rush. And as I understand it, although I'm certainly not any type of expert in this field, there's also a problem of limited labor to do these things as well. So it gums up the whole thing. Malia, I saw you were hanging out there.
Yes, thanks, Mayor and council members. Just to continue with Councilor Schmeckler's question, I wanted to say that, you know, we're looking at, we now have got guidance from SLIB on the ARPA funds, and I think they're going to give a 3-week kind of look at getting the ARPA funds out there and trying to have the first meeting in August. And you can correct me, Brooks, but to actually get the funds out there. They want master plans and they want stuff that's designed, which is what we thought. And so we're ready to go on some of our projects, the Sea Line and certain things to help us with the ARPA funds. They said they think that they're going to have all the funds allocated in the first. They think they're going to get $250 million in Quest with $50 million for water and wastewater. So we're going to be prepared for that meeting, for that item. I do believe there's another $50 million out there for economic development. I believe some of the projects, you know, we could potentially maybe go back on 3rd Street and do more of the water line on that because it might have some economic impact, or some of the other items that we have already designed. So we're looking, we don't have those rules yet. They only did water and wastewater. So, you know, we could potentially have some more projects under the $50 million economic development compliance type issues there for the state. But we're looking at everything. And so some of the stuff in the ARPA money, it's based on time. So you can't delay it, you know, so there's things, you know, the ARPA money has to be committed by 24 and the project has to be done by 26. So if you want the extra funds, you've got to have projects that you can go do right now. We have, you know, you have timelines on certain things that's, you know, have to coordinate with YDOT or certain projects. So it really depends on the project. You know, in North Tank, I think we have to do whatever we can to try to get that funded. I mean, we have a $12 million grant on that project, so grant loan. So grant money's on that project, and maybe they'll give us more loan dollars or something on that to help us once we get through. And I think that they probably will be committed on that just because it's a joint effort. So it really depends on the project whether you delay it or not. You know, we cut back or delay. I think it depends on the funding and what you're doing.
Vice Mayor, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, first I just want to say thanks to our staff for paying such close attention to our use of these dollars that are coming, federal dollars, state dollars, to help us with these infrastructure projects. So thanks for that. In terms of, you know, Councilor Schmeckel's thought about, you know, are there studies out there that can, you know, potentially give us a little insight? Yesterday, I read an article about what areas of the country where their housing prices are going down and why. And if they're doing, you know, if they're looking at housing prices going down and why, maybe there is something out there looking at, you know, infrastructure or pipe or, you know, whatever it is. I don't know, but I was surprised to see that that the housing, different areas of the country, housing costs are coming down. So I don't know if that's an early indicator. I don't know enough to know, but it might be an indicator. So just throw that out there. I realize it's not, you know, pipe construction, but it is an indicator of something, right? So I think we need to keep that in mind for whatever reason.
probably lots of reasons, which also makes me think of interest rates. And I don't think the city is immune to those effects either. Go ahead, Vice Mayor. I see you wanted to add something on that.
No, I was just agreeing. I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot.
I think that's also part. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, market volatility,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Right.
So yeah.
And Vice Mayor, it just makes me wonder and worry too about the city's need to include that in our math as well, in terms of delays and things of that nature, because there's a cost associated with that as well. It's a very difficult situation. Any other questions on this? I mean, it's obviously ripe for questions. Some of this information is obviously new and late breaking. We appreciate the staff sharing it with us so that we could talk about it a little bit tonight. And we understand there's probably more that we, a more productive conversation to have as we get more information. So, but we do appreciate it. And as the Vice Mayor says, we of course appreciate always your ongoing efforts to try to, manage costs for these and looking forward. I don't see any other hands popping up, City Manager, so we can probably go to the next part for now.
Okay, great. Just a couple comments and then we can kind of move on. As Malia mentioned, some of these projects already have grants tied to them and thereby a timeline ticking for us to accomplish them and not lose the grant or the low interest loan, as is the case with oftentimes water and sewer projects. So that's something that we'll need to evaluate. I will tell you, as we deal with inflation and increases in costs due to supply chain interruptions and labor and all of these issues, I do feel more confident when it comes to water and sewer projects that we will have a funding source to go to because of the enhanced SRF funding that is available under ARPA. So I'm going to put that out there and keep my fingers crossed. And I'm trying to pick myself up after hearing that bad news about the North Side Tank project and keep myself optimistic. One thing I also wanted to mention as we think of national factors that I just mentioned, inflation, supply chain, et cetera, is we likely will also have a regional factor influencing us, and that is the fact that there was the fire on the Front Range of Colorado this last, 3-4 months ago that burned down dozens, if not hundreds, I don't know how many homes. Last time we saw a significant regional event like that was the floods on the Front Range, and when we went out to bid in subsequent to construction seasons, we found that we were competing for labor that didn't exist because all of the contractors were down on the Front Range. Now that's a little bit different because they were repairing infrastructure back, 7-8 years ago when that happened. And this is homes and infrastructure. So I don't know how that will affect us, but it certainly weighs on me having been through those few years when they were sort of rebuilding all the infrastructure between Fort Collins and North Denver, now some 7-8 years ago. For council, I guess what I would tell you as we deal with this, we'll have to ask for your flexibility and you'll have to kind of help us react to what are really difficult times. When I was speaking with my colleagues, I mentioned late last week, some of the more seasoned city managers who had 20 plus years of experience were saying that as they're developing budget, this is literally the most challenging budgetary circumstances they had ever dealt with in 2+ decades. So hopefully that puts into context a little bit what I think we can all expect for upcoming years. So kind of, again, scrolling down, I'll get back on the exact topic on the page the clerk's sharing with us. 3rd Street and North Side Tank, obviously we're going to need to regroup on. Wyoming Avenue water line is slightly under $1 million. We've discussed that. And we can go ahead and scroll up, clerk. Sorry, scroll down, I meant. I did want to point out we continue to carry a reserve in this section of the water budget for coordination with the University of Wyoming. As you know, they are doing extensive vertical construction on campus, and that has underground infrastructure effects. We are carrying this. We don't know that we will need it. They haven't asked for it, but for instance, with the dormitory project that we're working with them on, there's some question right now about modeling in the sewer system, for instance. And so we had put this here, so a number of years ago, we'd put this funds into the budget as a placeholder so that if we got into a situation where we needed to act timely, we had budgetary authorization from council to do so. That hasn't happened yet, which is good, but I just want to point out we continue to leave that there, trying to be a good partner. Scrolling down, another notable expenditure.
Are you talking about the line that says UW project coordination? Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Just checking
Yes.
which line, not
And
the
the
MOU.
Lewis Street. Oh yeah, the Lewis Street MOU is also obviously associated with the university, but we did make some agreements in that memorandum of understanding for how we would coordinate infrastructure changes in that street, and we had a financial commitment, through the MOU.
Thank you.
So scrolling down the page, City Clerk, on the next line, you'll see the Water Master Plan. This is a notable expenditure and deserves a little bit of our time. I think I will let Brooks get his camera on and we can talk to you about this. But I will say, just as a precursor, the city does have a master plan. It is necessary and required by our funding partners, and also just under, I think, EPA rule, that we periodically update our master plan, and we are at the point in time when we need to do that. This cost is fairly significant, $2 million, and we're planning here not only to update the master plan, but to do some additional work, modeling work, and an evaluation of the treatment plant. And that's what's driving this cost. This is a little more than a master plan would typically cost. Brooks and Eric, would you like to pipe in and share maybe a little more detail?
Sure. The water master plan we currently have is pushing 10 years old, and the Wyoming Water Development Agency doesn't necessarily require, but strongly suggests that every 10 years your master plan is updated. I was at the water conference last week in Casper, where WWDO, SRF were there, and they talked a lot about master plans and making sure they're up to date for funding opportunities. Most of the projects that you see in our capital budget are developed and brought forward through the master plan. Not all of them. Some of the projects are things that pop up on us we didn't know about, older broken lines or something, but most of the larger projects are originally planned in the master plan. The treatment plan evaluation, we had one of those done over 10 years ago. And now that the plant is over 60 years old, we need to get that updated and see what it's going to take to keep that plant operational into the future. So kind of a big project. This is one of the ones that we're planning for the state ARPA money to apply for when that becomes available in the next couple months. But yeah, just pretty much it's time to do it again and get everything updated within the plan.
Hey, Nancy, could you scroll back up to page 113? Council, I'd love to scroll back up here because I think page 113 really illustrates for you what Brooks was just saying. And I talked about these prioritization factors at the first meeting, but this is sort of the matrix we use to make decisions in time about the priority and order in which we'll do projects. And you'll see that second column from the right that says master plan, and you'll see every project has a master plan check mark. So it really is what guides us, and frankly, most of our funders won't fund a project unless it's been previously identified and planned through the master planning process. Thanks, Nancy. We can go back to the page we were on. That's especially important in water and sewer because SRF funds from EPA down through state agencies really require you to show that you have planned these projects and they're well thought out and not just something you dreamed up last week, I guess. So $2 million is a significant expense. I'll tell you our plan is to apply for ARPA funds for hopefully 1.7 million of this. So we'll see how successful we are. Typically, we are well supported by the funding agencies in preparing master plans for all the reasons that Brooks and I just talked about. Gives them some surety that when they come in and fund actual construction, it was necessary. We can scroll, keep going on down, Nancy. Have any questions, Council, please feel free. The next page. Okay, so I wanted to spend a little time on the last cost center within the water fund, and that is at the bottom of the page here. This is the water rights and protection. I promised you earlier when we looked at the connection infrastructure for the 41T3 that you'd see it echoed further down for the well drilling, actual drilling of the well, and that is shown within this cost center. As you can see, we are planning to rebudget that $408,000 that will pay for the drilling that's been underway this weekend and hopefully wrapping up in the next few weeks. In addition, a lot of these projects, as you can see, are being carried forward into the coming biennium from the current one. Those include your well drilling for the Casper Aquifer Protection objectives outlined in our plan, the Aquifer Protection Plan update funds, the Hazmat Spill Emergency Response Plan, Pioneer Pasture Rehabilitation, and then finally the 41T3 that we just discussed. Some new funds, well, actually, I skipped over one of the rebudgeted, also the consumptive use plan update. We've known we need to do that. We did not start it this year, wanting to wait until the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan was completed, and then move on to from groundwater to surface water and consumptive use in the river. So we are rebudgeting that $50,000 into the upcoming biennium as well, along with the I-80 monitoring wells. Darren has had some early conversation, and as has your intergovernmental committee number 1, the catch-all committee, about where I-80 monitoring wells could be located. We've drilled many monitoring wells, but the county appears willing to work with us to look at wells that would specifically take a look at effects that I-80 could have or spills on I-80 could have in the future. The Dowland Headgate structure at the bottom, the water rights petitions, and the Phase 2 Go Forth are all also rebudgeted projects that we'd like to keep working on. We finished Phase 1 of the Go Forth, and Darren just last week met with some folks from Ducks Unlimited, and I think one of our other funding partners on Phase 1 to gauge their interest for Phase 2, and we're getting positive feedback from those partners, so that's very encouraging. If you have any question on any of these projects, I will do my utmost best to answer them, or we'll get you an answer. And I shouldn't skip over the ventilation at the low-level tank. That's a fairly large project, as well as our water treatment plant PLC replacement. If you have questions about that, we can answer those. PLC replacement, that's the logic controllers, that's $600,000 in year 1 of the biennium, so nothing to sneeze at for sure. Okay. So this would sort of wrap up the water fund, and we would be ready to move on to the wastewater sanitary sewer fund. I don't necessarily want to leave if you have any questions pertaining to water.
Questions about this?
Nancy?
I don't think so, Janine. I think, and again, that's
okay,
probably
very good.
because we get a pretty detailed update about a lot of these on a regular basis.
Yeah, I should reiterate as well, Council. I know we talked about some of these a little bit last time, but you should know too, we're going to go over our capital construction plans for the summer, also in a work session for you next week. So it's all capital, all week, all month, something like that. Moving on to the wastewater fund, that's on page 145, Nancy. And again, we start off with our vehicle replacements and purchases. Again, in the scope of all of the city's investments in fleet and large equipment, what is in the wastewater fund is also relatively small at $1.3 million. Probably the largest thing that we plan to replace is, I believe, oh no, I'm thinking of solid waste. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of us. 886,000 in collection. So we do have one large piece of equipment, but the rest are more standard pieces of equipment that we're page. Nancy, can you scroll up a little bit? Up, yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so as we look at construction projects in the Wastewater Fund, these are your collection-related projects in the top of the page here. You can see a lot of these are projects from the current year that we will be finishing in this year, and so the money being carried forward or rebudgeted, as we say, into that gray column. A couple new things, we do have the Spring Creek sewer replacement, or excuse me, that's the wrong line. The next line, we do have C line replacement phase 2 underway, and we'll be able to move into the next phase of the project. And so you see $2 million being recommended in 23 for that next phase. We talked quite a bit about the C line at your last capital work session, and this ties to the potential to correct the street, that is Ivinson Street, and so we need to get through this underground work before we can look at surface improvements there, but certainly keeping an eye on that. You'll see we also have in the wastewater side the University of Wyoming Project Coordination Reserve there. None of it spent in the last biennium, and carrying that forward as rebudget into the future biennium. Then looking at some of your newer projects, we always carry funds in the budget for sewer oversizing. 108,000 recommended in the first year of the biennium, and that's because we don't always know when developers are going to come forward, and we may request that they oversize a sewer line, and then by city code we'll pay for the difference in cost between the size of pipe they needed and the size of pipe we asked them to build. So we carry this reserve here for unforeseen needs for oversizing. North 3rd Street, again, here you see money related to the projects we're doing there. $250,000 first year and $2.5 million in the second year, and this is where I would like to ask Brooks to maybe talk a little bit about this project for us.
Sure. Honorable Mayor, City Council. So this project is the first year, 2023, $250,000 is for design, and then 24 is the construction. This basically connects the sewer line from the furthest northest point, basically where the new municipal operations center is, and brings sewer back into the city to the main lift. Currently, the MOC and surrounding properties go into some lagoons that are right next to the Laramie River. And so this will bring all that sanitary sewer into the treatment center instead of into the lagoons.
Thanks, Brooks. Very helpful. Hands raised. Okay, so as I continue down the list here, also maybe Brooks, touch on the main lift a little bit. This is a very large project and a very important project, frankly, and in the vicinity, of course, of where Brooks had just discussed.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, City Council. So the West Laramie main lift station is right outside of the wastewater treatment plant, and basically everything in West Laramie goes to that area, then is lifted into the plant for treatment. It's the main lift is old. It's reaching its expected life. And also with the project, we'll be upsizing it for future development in the area. It handles what we have right now, but for future development, as things grow out over, especially on the west side of Laramie, we're going to need some more capacity there. So this is basically to replace a lot of the inner workings of the lift station, and then upsize that for future capacity needs.
Brooks, I think it's fair to say this is probably the most important part of the wastewater treatment utility, other than the plant itself.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if the lift station's not working, then stuff's not flowing.
Right. It's not lifting up to be treated, it's flowing back downhill. Is that a good way to put it? To places where none of us want it to go. Yeah, back to our homes. Council, that is really the highlights, I would say, of the collection cost center within the wastewater treatment utility. If you don't have questions in that section, then we could move on to the treatment plant itself. So a number of projects rebudgeted here. I just want to reiterate, sometimes folks think rebudgeting projects means you didn't get them done on time, and that is not the case. We always are carrying projects, particularly where they involve underground work across multiple construction years. So I have to say that for Brooks and all of our hardworking folks in Public Works edification. We have a number of projects here, notably the wastewater treatment plant upgrade and project design. That's a significant project that you'll see well over $600,000 of a $800,000 budget expended. That project is being wrapped up probably as we speak. And then some ongoing issues with ditch cleaning and the security system improvements. Those did not get completed this year, but we expect they will be completed in the upcoming year. Also on the next page, first row, the wastewater treatment plant construction on the upgrades is being carried forward, and I believe, Brooks, we're starting that this year, are we not? And when I say this year, I mean calendar year 22?
Yeah, Janine, that was that project was actually awarded at council a few weeks back, and the contractor is ramping up, getting ready for that project. It did that 9.5 is the SRF funding. And it, I think I don't remember the exact number, but the bid actually came in underneath that number. So it was one of the projects that was under. Yay! but yeah, that project will get underway here pretty soon. With the amount of equipment and controls that are involved in that, I imagine that's going to drag on a little bit with the material supply chain the way it is. But we're getting underway here very soon.
Great, thank you for that reminder that the bid had been awarded. That's the project list, but maybe if we just take a look at the project-related revenue, it kind of dovetails off of what Brooks just told us. You see the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project construction noted there with $1.9 million and what's called the green category of funding under Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And at 0% interest. And I wanted to point this chart out to you because you did have this, council, for all of your funds, water fund included. I just didn't go over it in any great detail, but if you are curious about where revenue comes from for each of the large projects, we do break it down here, particularly if there is federal dollars or other grants associated with it. And as I said before, you'll see these notations of CWSRF, Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Anytime you see SRF, that is the federal EPA money that passes through our state agencies and is a huge source of funding for water and wastewater both. And then you'll also see here the abbreviations on federal ARPA. Of course, we've discussed that as well. And we are denoting here where we have federal ARPA or state pass-through ARPA, and what percent is grant and what percent might be a grant loan hybrid. And if there is a loan component, then we will denote the interest rate that we are either applying for or we have already received.
Janine, if I could add something, I have some good news.
Please bring it, because my head's still really sad hearing Malia's bomb about the Northside tank.
Yeah, well,
we've only been working on it for 6 years.
Yeah, well, if you recall, also a few weeks ago, we brought you an amendment to the loan agreement with the SRF on the wastewater treatment plant, so that interest rate is now 1.25% instead of 2.5. And if you recall, that's a $1.6 million savings over the life of the loan. And then we also just very recently heard from Rocky Mountain Power, who has been reviewing the plans for that project. And we're expecting approximately $200,000 incentive from Rocky Mountain Power for the energy savings that the project will realize.
Good.
Excuse me, Brooks, you're talking about the project for the wastewater treatment plant?
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It's not all bad. Jenny, we lost your sound. Sorry.
Sorry, I muted myself for a second. That's sort of the end of wastewater. And I did go through it pretty quick and try to focus on like notable construction projects and not just ongoing maintenance-y kinds of things. So if you would like to go into any more detail, we can.
Go ahead, Councilor Doherty.
Oh, I was just wondering, maybe Nancy, well, I don't know if anybody from the public is looking, but if you show, like, if you click on one of those items, like under project reference, and then if you do then it shows you the details. So the description and justification for fellow counselors and for anybody in the public that is nerdy enough to go through this budget detail. It's really helpful. So that whenever I have a question, I click on that and I realize, oh yeah, it's all here. So I should just be quiet. Thank you.
I think that's great, Councilor Doherty.
City Manager, councilors, I'm going to let Judy Snoke make a comment because I think it's related to whatever Councilor Doherty was talking about. I believe she's the only public.
I'm smiling. Thank you, Mayor and Councilor. And because I'm enough of a geek that's what I would do. So I appreciate the geek trips. That's all. But thank you. This is hard work. I mean, it just gives me a headache just thinking about all of this. Kudos to all of you.
And I think also it's probably worth pointing out that the reporters that cover Laramie, they'll go back and watch these and they may integrate that kind of information about how the public can track this stuff down in their stories. So it's good to sort of spell it out. Judy, thanks for being here with us, headache and all. City Manager.
Okay, we're ready to move on to our solid waste fund, and that is page 169. It's the last of our 3 proprietary enterprise funds. Solid waste fund is where we account for the collection and the disposal of solid waste in the community. This is a fairly small fund compared to the water and wastewater fund, and you'll see the outlay for fleet, vehicles, and equipment is $3 million, quite a bit more than it was in those larger funds. And I think that illustrates that for solid waste, our equipment is everything, right? Particularly on the collection side. The trucks that we use to collect are very expensive, and rightly so. They're the workhorses and do a lot of work. So in this upcoming biennium, we are planning to replace a number of pieces of important equipment. If you look under the vehicle replacement or the second chart, you'll see that in the disposal side, we've got a couple small pieces, small vehicles that we're replacing, one in disposal and one in collection, excuse me. But if you scroll down to that third chart, equipment replacements, this is where we get into the large pieces of equipment that are fairly expensive, starting in the first row with the landfill track loader, which is almost $500,000. Then 3 lines down, you'll see we do have a compactor that needs replaced. That'll be $580,000. And then scrolling down 3 or 4 more lines into collection, a front loader needing needing to be replaced, $436,000, and an automated truck, and this is $387,000. Brooks, remind me on this automated truck, unit 679. I do believe that looks very low in cost, so this must not be the large collection truck.
Janine, this is one of the large collection trucks. And then the last one we awarded was just under $400,000. So it's pretty close. to what we're seeing right now. But it is the automated truck 679 is one of the dual arm ones that you see residential pickup, where the difference with the front loader is the truck we use for commercial collections.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's what I was trying to differentiate. Very good. So keeping those trucks running, they put on tons of hours, as you know, Council. We're replacing them, I believe, on par of one every couple years, basically, at this point in time. So this is expected. Some of the smaller pieces of equipment, I think, are stemming from what I discussed, which was some kind of deferred maintenance over the past few years, as we struggled with just the uncertainty of what our revenue might look like for this biennium.
Hey, Janine, I had a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Brooks, I remember when we were talking about a replacement truck a little bit earlier, a couple of months back, and the supply chain situation was like, I think you said 9 months or maybe even more than that. Is that pretty much the situation with a lot of these replacements that we're looking at?
Absolutely, Councilor Gabriel, through you, Mayor. We just received a automated truck, a new dual arm truck that council awarded 18 months ago, and that just came in last week. So we are seeing really long lead times on stuff, especially on the larger equipment, anywhere from 18 months to 2 years at this point.
Wow, thank you.
Okay, so that's your fleet, vehicles, and equipment. We're ready to go look at projects on the next page. The first three are rebudgeted projects that I think the council are largely familiar with, as we've discussed them over the last year and since the last budget meetings in the spring of 21. I would note, on the indoor meeting space expansion, that's your fourth line down, I am recommending the addition of additional funding to this project, $200,000. And you had previously awarded the $75,000. We just understand that we need more meeting space for our solid waste staff. Right now, they do have a small meeting room. It's not really temperature controlled. It's adjacent to the tipping floor, and really doesn't meet the needs we have for training and for folks to have breaks and for just storing some sort of sensitive temperature dependent equipment. So I am recommending this $200,000 addition based on what we've seen with prices. I hope that is going to be sufficient after our conversation earlier this evening. I don't know where that will go. But I did want to point that out to you as kind of I think an important need that we have for staff at this point in time, and just to make a better space for us to be more functionally operational out at that facility. We probably undersized the meeting space when we first built the building, probably because we were cheaping it, right? It was a big lift to go from basically an 1880s circa landfill to what we have now, and we probably should have made it bigger at the time. We also plan to do some chip seal on the road out there. I'm recommending $80,000 for that. And then Brooks, I would like to maybe talk a little bit more about this next item, but I am recommending $150,000 for some evaluation and potential redesign on the front entrance for functionality. So Brooks?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you've been out there, we during the summertime, we don't have a whole lot of room for stacking. When that entrance was built 10 years ago, it was sufficient and worked great. These last few years, we've seen a big increase in traffic at the landfill. And so it's very common, especially during the summertime on the weekends, to get traffic that stacks out onto Roger Canyon Road there. It's like 50 miles an hour zone through there, so it can get pretty dangerous. So we want to do an evaluation, basically an engineering evaluation, to look at that entrance for long-term, how that'll work out long-term with growth and the development of the landfill in the future. And then down lower where you see we call it landfill concrete paving, the front entrance, that evaluation will determine what we need to do there to improve the traffic flow at the entrance. And that's what that 350 is for. Not 100% sure if that's a great number at this point until that evaluation is completed. But we queued up the evaluation obviously before the work, so we know it needs to be done.
Something I always think about whenever we talk about that staff room at the landfill next to the tipping site. I hope everybody remembers how the skunks and the raccoons like to get in there. So maybe they can have exclusive use of that room now, if we've got enough meeting space out there at the new Public Works office. Anyway, I just can't resist bringing that up. I don't know if it was raccoons or skunks. It was one of those friendly little animals.
It's both.
Oh, good. Okay.
So
right,
planning and evaluation in year 1, and then some potential construction money in year 2. And then the other thing here, Council, you see we're beginning the design for the next section of the landfill, cells 3A and 3B, and the corresponding leachate ponds. So that will begin in the second year of the biennium. We anticipate about $150,000 and recommended that in fiscal 24. And that is the Solid Waste Fund. Just at the bottom of that page, just to finish it out, you see the prioritization factors for these disposal projects. We note they're all within, we believe, your City Council goals, dealing also with safety and keeping general conditions at the level that we need them to be out there, and then also expanding the capacity of the landfill to continue providing that service. That's it. Solid waste. There's enterprise funds, just like that. We're all wrapped up.
I have a question, and it's for Brooks. You're talking about those long lead times on the trucks, going out as far as 2 years, and I think you folks try to build this stuff in, but it does concern me a little bit about what our plans would be if some of that equipment failed before we were able to get something in. And as I was thinking about that before I even asked the question, I guess what I want to know is what our plans are if that is the case. I guess we might have to change routes around, and pickup times would have to be different. That's the first thing that comes to the top of my head. But I wonder what other options are out there if we've got a piece of equipment that isn't working anymore, and we've got another 14 months or something we have to wait before we get it in. I'm just curious a little bit about what the approach would be. I don't think that's likely to happen, because I think we try to replace these things on that schedule before we get into those worries, but anything can happen. So I wonder if you might just...
Sure. Honorable Mayor, City Council. So we do have backup equipment, right? We don't just have what we use every day. We've got in solid waste, they have there's 2 extra collection vehicles that we rotate through to make sure we're using them all the time. So if it's quite common for at least one of them to be down at any given time, whether it's just for normal service or a larger issue. We also most of our trucks we get extended warranties on them. And so they're still under warranty, and so we're able to usually get those repaired pretty quickly, pretty timely. If we got in a situation where we're short trucks, we would. You're absolutely right. We either alter routes or, is what we've done in the past, is overtime. Guy instead of doing one route that day, he'll do a route and a half, right? And the other guy will do a route and a half to make up for that. But I think the way our replacement schedule is set up right now with solid waste, we've got that covered. So I think we're okay there.
I appreciate that, and that's just kind of where my mind jumps to when we talk about lead times that long on equipment that is that important to kind of a day-to-day operation that everybody sees. So I'm glad to hear about that. And
I think where we may run into more of an issue at times is at the landfill, because we don't have as much backup equipment, because some of that is so expensive. But we've got a pretty good relationship with Caterpillar dealer, and we're able to get rentals and loaners in when we need to, and so that's been very helpful.
Thank you. That's good. That's good to know. Appreciate it. Thank you, City Manager. I wanted to kind of cover that a little bit.
Councilor Schuster had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Schuster. Sorry.
He already answered it, just like he said, whenever we need it and we have a piece of equipment down, we can call our main supplier, CAT, and work with them, and they'll bring us over a loaner. They have a lease company setting in as close as Cheyenne. So we can have something over here in one day for us. And I'm sure it's the same way because we buy a lot of stuff from CAT, Wyoming CAT. They have an office and a shop in Cheyenne. So they take care of their customers. You take care of them by buying equipment. They take care of you by making sure you have equipment. So they're very good to deal with.
Mayor,
Thank you, Councilor.
Mayor, also, if I could add, I just got an email from Jen Wade. She reminded me that in our general fund, we put all of our fleet replacements in the first biennium. So, and none in the second biennium, or in the first year of the biennium, and none in the second year of the biennium. So we did that because of these lead times. We want to be able to go out to bid in the first year of the biennium because we're not going to be getting a lot of those vehicles until the second year anyway. We did not do that in the enterprise funds, but I'm going to talk to Jen about that, and we may do that on that side also, because especially with that larger equipment, it just makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate the discussion around this. Don't want to be caught without that stuff available, because I think it would be disruptive for folks. So glad to hear about all of those kinds of backup plans and the way that you've set up the replacement schedule. I had an inkling that there had been some thought about it, so it's great for us to hear more about it. Thanks. Are we open just for all questions now? Questions about the fund that we just covered? I think the city manager had said that was getting us towards the end here. So this is a good time if you've been sitting on a question or two, and we've got folks here that can answer them. It's kind of a mixed bag of news, but I wanted to just touch on again. There are some things that we're waiting to hear more about that might make it a little less grim. I think it's probably safe to say, city manager and city council members, we can probably just settle in, or buckle in, maybe is a better way to put it, with this price volatility and how that's going to affect our long range planning and how that's going to affect our need for those budget adjustments that we do mid-year. And I think we understand that, and we'll do our best to communicate that to people in the public that may be wondering, thinking about those things too. That's just it's the world we're living in, and the city isn't immune to it at all. It's not good, but we do have some thoughts and some ideas about how we might navigate it, so we'll do our best. They may not last forever. Some of those price volatility situations, they're not necessarily projected to last for 5 years. They're kind of a right now and for a little while, but we don't know how long. So I guess there's that. That's worth remembering too. I don't see anybody else eager to ask questions right now, city manager.
Okay, well, council, as you think, if you have any questions, I think what I'll do is turn it over to Jennifer Wade, and she can talk to you about the amendment process and what to expect leading up to the special meeting where you can amend, modify, change the capital construction budget. Hi, Jen.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Councilors. Thanks, City Manager. I actually just emailed you all the budget motion forms for the special meeting on May the 10th. And so just as a point of reminder, like Janine said earlier, there are actually 2 special meetings on the budget. This first special meeting focuses on the capital investment plan. And we actually started this 2 special meeting system a couple of years ago. It's worked very well, and it actually matches the council's work session schedule. And so you're presented the capital budget, and then you're allowed to make motions to amend it at the special meeting. The same process will happen with the operating budget, and that date, I believe, is May the 26th, although don't quote me on that. We will remind you of that date later on. And so this is the first of 2 opportunities to make motions to change the budget. The process is relatively painless. We have some standard motion forms, and Chief Operating Officer Brown or myself would be happy to help you draft your motions. If you have a recommended funding source, if you're making an addition or you have a project you'd like to see go, if you have a swap out, please let us know that. If you don't have anything, we can actually help you come up with solutions. And so it's really open-ended, and we just encourage you to communicate with us. The deadline we're asking for is end of day next Wednesday, May the 4th, so that gives you a little bit over a week to get your initial ideas for motions to the capital budget in. And with that summary, I would open it up for any questions.
Thank you very much. And council members, I'd encourage you to take a look at those forms, the sheets now, so that if you have a question about the materials that you're going to use for this process, this is as good as a time as any. And while you're doing that, City Manager, I might just query you. Given that there's some kind of fluid things that maybe we'll have more information about over that same time period, I suppose, is it reasonable for the council to expect that you might ask us to make some adjustments depending on what information comes forward in that time frame, or are we going to try to avoid that?
Mayor, let me clarify. Are you asking if we would make adjustments to the budget prior to its adoption?
Yeah, if you might ask us, if you might use this time as well for possible adjustments and bring those to us at that special meeting date, so we might make those before, at the same time, before the final passage.
Yeah, I think for my purposes, if we have any definitive information and we know we can make an adjustment to the budget such that when we publish it in late May for the 10-day publication period, it's more accurate than it is tonight, then we would make those changes. However,
Okay.
we'd be back in front of you, even if nothing else, in a memo format to let you know and draw your attention to. And where you
Yeah, that seems clear enough. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Honorable Mayor, you have a great memory. So it is quite normal for the staff to bring forward some amendments to the final budget. So some of these things can be for new and breaking items, and I think that's really what you're asking the city manager about. But we also always have a few administrative amendments. There are some errors that we find in the budget book that we really like to get corrected. We have a few of those this year. And we have things like the fleet issue that Director Webb just mentioned. I think we're going to move all the enterprise fleet into fiscal year 2023. That just makes sense. And so we will have some motions of our own to present. They'll be very transparent and will lead you through all the changes that we're recommending to the budget the city manager has proposed.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And the city manager kind of got to that point too. I just wanted to sort of float that as maybe if we wanted to use that meeting, if we don't get a lot of council capital amendments, which I think we probably won't. There may be a couple, I don't know, but we might use that to kind of walk through those and do them as a package so that they were ready for final adoption later. But that's of course up to all of you guys and how you want to do it. Council members, if you've had a chance to kind of look at that form, and if you have any questions, go ahead. If not, you've heard the invitation to work with our staff for whatever you might need by way of amendments to the budget over that time period, so that you have them ready by May 4th, I think is what well, that's when we're probably going to have a meeting. So you want to have them ready by the meeting and then probably have the staff look at them. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Honorable Mayor, through you, May 4th is the deadline. I believe that's next Wednesday, and our first special meeting is on May 10th. And so that's giving us about a week in advance of the meeting to work out any details for council proposed motions.
Thank you. It also, my not that great memory, frankly, Jen also has me thinking that we have a meeting on the 4th as well, but it may be for a different issue. Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any questions about the process. Seems like we're okay. And again, staff, that's because you guys have really streamlined this budget process, and frankly, I think put in a lot of efficiencies with it that we appreciate. So it kind of becomes a routine for us, and I think we can follow it and follow the process that you've outlined for us without problems. And it's always great to, in the middle of the works. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, City Manager. Go right ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say, you were scheduled to complete the Enterprise Fund Capital tomorrow. We've completed it. If there's anything you would like to cover during tomorrow's work related to the budget, please just do it. But if not, then you would only have one, not two work sessions tomorrow evening, and the one remaining would be survey kickoff.
Okay. Okay. I saw Malia pop up for a second, but she turned her camera off, so she probably doesn't need to weigh in. Is there anything that council would like to have for a work session tomorrow, or should we just go ahead and wait until our other scheduled meetings? My guess is probably people would like to just go ahead, and there isn't anything extra. I don't see anything. So that's good. And what I was going to say a second ago was it's always interesting in the middle of the work session to sort of map out potential changes that might be beneficial, like moving that vehicle replacement schedule to the 23 year because of the lead time. So that's good. I think that's a good thing to be doing for all the reasons that we've talked about tonight. So that's an amendment that we'll put forward. All right. What should we check and see if there's other public comment then? And close the work session. All right. Well, we'll see if Judy Snoke has anything else she wants to share with us, because she's still our only guest. And doesn't look like it, so we'll close the public comment period, and then we'll go to the routine, and that is for the council updates and comments. And just open it up. Go ahead, Councilmember Harrington, then I'll go to Councilmember Gabriel next.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a couple for you. The first one is I wanted to let the council know that the Laramie Public Art Coalition has moved the executive director to a full-time position. She had to date been working full-time, but only being paid for part-time, really. And she is now in a full-time position. I think that's an exciting thing for the organization, and it comes on the heels of a pretty substantial fundraising effort by her and members of the board to make that possible. The Pilot Hill group is gearing up for a pretty busy season of building following their fundraising efforts as well. There will be significant continuation on the trail system up there this summer. And there are several opportunities for the public to plug in. If you just hop on their website, you'll see ambassador trainings and volunteer opportunities abound this spring. So check those out. And then I think it's worth noting, last week we passed the downtown initiatives. It was on our consent agenda last week. I just wanted to acknowledge the staff that worked on that. I think in a lot of ways that demonstrates that our staff is listening to the public. It pivoted some of those initiatives we had made in the past into more amenable places. And I think that that's a really great step by the staff. And so I wanted to acknowledge that, Mayor. And then I think the last one I have for you is about the airport board. You all received an email from 6 or so folks that frequent the airport out there. It might be more than that. I don't know. It was a fairly lengthy letter that you and every other elected official and other person in the area was also CC'd on. You also received an email from the director and members of the board, the leadership team on the board. The response you received from the airport's attorney and board members, I think lacked some editorializing that, as your liaison, I just wanted to provide for you. I think for the sake of context, I would say those things really boiled down to complaints about things cost more, and this isn't how it's always been done. And I think largely that may make a lot of sense to me. You all know the financial picture the airport was in in recent memory, and the decisions at the airport are being made, I think, entirely based on the financial picture of the Laramie Airport. The alternative being not having an airport, right? So, I was frustrated by some of those, knowing the hard work that's going in at the airport. I was frustrated by some of those concerns. And frankly, I was frustrated by some of those concerns not being raised directly with the director before they were sent sort of to the wind and to all every elected they could get their hands on. So, I mean, that's my own, like I said, my own editorializing, but I would let the council know that as your liaison, I think the executive director of the airport and the board are doing a terrific job. It's a really pretty untenable situation. The financial picture out there was not optimistic, and I am now quite optimistic about where the airport is headed. But Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add, I guess, maybe a very clear note of support for the director of the airport in a public forum like this. And I really appreciate you all listening to it.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. I fielded a couple of calls about that. I'd like to ask you something as our liaison out there. And it's my understanding that we had Mr. Brubaker from the Rock Springs Regional Airport, Sweetwater County Regional Airport, as a guest at last meeting. Is that right?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Malia can speak to it more. I was ill the next day and missed the meeting. But yes, spoke at length, sort of acknowledging her good work as well. But I'll let Malia address some of that.
Well, yeah, I was going to say my understanding is that somebody like Mr. Brubaker is received a lot of recognition statewide for doing an excellent job of the management of that airport out there. It was sort of brought in as kind of a third party to kind of do a informal assessment of practices that have been put in place there to operate and run that airport by modern standards. And my understanding is his impression is everything that's been put in place there under the new management has been more than appropriate and is necessary. But Malia, if you wanted to add anything to that, I'd give you a chance.
Yes, Mayor. Basically, Devin Brubaker really addressed the tenants out there and probably put some of the letter in perspective of really, it was pretty much in accordance with FAA and some of the regulations that airports run, and some of the comparisons. They were comparing Greeley and other places, but not Wyoming. He said, those airports have a lot more passengers and can do overhead differently, and pretty much said that probably the directors are going to write a letter to the council and commissioners in really detailing what he had detailed at our airport board. And so he really was a supporter and felt, he said he couldn't comment on some things, but the things he did comment was very positive for the airport. I believe that the airport board, there was a lot of questions about the revenues and stuff, and I think we did open up at the airport board. You'll probably see a boomerang article coming out soon for what has happened at the airport. I would be happy to discuss with any of you all the stuff that has gone on, but I believe that the airport has done, we're at the place where the books were not being done since 2018. We've recreated the books. They're probably going to be finished in May. We finally got an auditor on board. They're going to do 3 years of audit to catch up 2019, 2021, and hopefully we'll get caught up to the year we're in. And we might have beginning balances to know what our revenues are. I think one comment I would like to say is a lot of the people think that we just get a lot of grants and that, we don't need additional money, but we're spending over $500,000 just to catch up the accounting and auditing. And, you get $1 million on CRISA grant, which is the passengers of over 10,000. Fortunately, we have the ARPA money this year of $1 million for operations, but that literally we need about $2 million each year, and we're spending all this money on maintenance and accounting and stuff from the past, so we're not catching up ahead at all. And so I think it's very little revenue coming in from the people who are actually leasing on the rentals. I mean, most of the rentals are land leases, and we've negotiated $420 annually for those rental spaces. They were at 20 cents a square foot. We're charging 25 cents a square foot. A lot of it was never collected because a lot of the board actually passed that they didn't have to pay for the rental spaces. So, they were upset with, I think, just the whole leases and some of the things out there. And some of the things that they're upset with, I think there's a communication, just lack of communication and understanding of how the airport runs and what some of the policies really are. I met with the FAA 2 hours with the director yesterday, and the FAA regional airports or regional compliance office said they would come out and work with these people with us to really go over and provide education to the tenants and have them understand what our compliances are and what we can do and not do. And so I think that will help.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I think sometimes having the outside viewpoints, either from the federal authorities or folks that are running airports in other parts of the state, probably a good idea. And I'm glad those things are happening. I appreciate those updates from the liaison and from you, Malia. Thank you very much. We'll hear more about it. I've got Councilor Gabriel next, then I'll go to Councilmember Schuster.
Thanks, Mayor. Attended the Albany County Tourism Board meeting last week. They're anticipating a record tourism season based on advanced bookings. Things are really looking up. They're doing a great job down there. 800 South 3rd is being renovated, which will include a gift shop. Hopefully they'll have that done by mid to late May, maybe even sooner, the renovation part. But that was sorely needed down there, and really, they got a great board now, and Scott's doing a really good job as director. And so things are looking up in the tourism industry for sure. That's all I have.
Glad to hear it. Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Councilmember Schuster, you're next.
Thank you. Wyoming Territorial Park meets tomorrow night. I will try to do a better job of writing down what their schedule is for the rest of this spring and summer. Your UW graduation's coming up, so anybody that has rooms to book at the Historic Railroad Depot is going on. I'll let Mr. Smuckle talk about this weekend at the rifle range, since I attend those meetings too, but that's about all the updates for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Other updates. Councilmember O'Doherty.
Attended the Shepherd Symposium, the Community Climate Summit on Earth Day last Friday. And that was a report from this interagency group that the students got together trying to figure out ways that we could reduce greenhouse emissions and such by working together with the county and the university. And Tom Herod from ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, he came and spoke to us. And we had reports about the recommendations from several people that served on the board. So besides me, and we had Mary Grace Bedwell from the Environmental Advisory Committee, Frosty Selmer from UW, and Pete Gosar from the County Commission, and then Dr. Rachel Bedoli from the Hub School. And so some of the recommendations were to buy bulk buy things like solar panels, so that if one organization is buying them, then some other agency maybe could work together, because shipping is trucking is a lot of that cost. There's a great interest in unified waste for commercial composting, And I know the city is not there yet because we feel like we have a good process, but it's something we would like to explore. Commissioner Gosar talked about a unified transportation network. Rhiannon McLean, who is a UW student, she talked about electric and hybrid fleets and the power packs that we talked about for like emergency vehicles so they don't have to be idling. Frosty Sommer from UW talked about the availability of energy audits. And so these are available right now. Pacific Power or Rocky Mountain Power will do energy audits for free. And if we can save energy, we don't have to produce as much. So that was encouraged. And then a lot of it was to keep up with the annual emissions inventory. And the county is now doing that too through a student at UW. And then also it's like engaging the community in all these actions. So we have a list of recommendations that I can send to council once I find it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Next up is Vice Mayor Pierce, and then I'll go to Councilor Schmeckel and then Cumbie. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Last night we had a planning commission meeting. It was actually a work session related to a consulting firm that was hired, I believe, jointly by the county and the city related to our potential growth areas. So Nancy, our city clerk, sent out an email kind of with Derek's update on that meeting. So I would encourage all of you to read and to participate, and really looking forward to that work session. The sooner we get that scheduled, I think the better it'll be. So we kind of get looped in. The group is actually, I think they kicked off their meetings yesterday with the Planning Commission. They're working with more stakeholder groups even today. So things are starting to really pick up some speed. So look at that information and really look forward to that work session that we're hopefully going to have really soon on that issue. So thanks. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Yes, that email is in your inbox, council members, Laramie Area Growth Plan. I do recommend you take a look at it. City Manager, did you have a comment in relation to that last point?
Mayor, I did. Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on Vice Mayor Pierce's comment. We were able today to actually schedule a work session for council next week on May 4th. We had planned on the growth plan, obviously. So we'll be in front of you with some information. Doesn't mean you shouldn't read your email, but we will be able to talk to you next Wednesday about that because we had a cancellation on another topic, or I shouldn't say a cancellation, a delay of the dorm project review with the university until June. So we were able to scoot that growth area plan in so you can get a look at what's going on sooner versus later.
Great. Thank you very much for that. That works out perfectly. Thank you.
So it will happen sooner than later, Vice Mayor. Good. Okay, Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. And as is predictable here, I lost my notes, and so we'll probably need to rely upon Councilmember Schuster to give the full update, because undoubtedly I will forget some details here. But I do recall that the next public day at the Laramie Rifle Range is going to be May 21st. I do believe there is an event this weekend, but for the life of me, I can't remember if it's a work weekend or a shoot of some kind. I'm hoping he's still around so that he might give some details.
I'm here. My computer dropped me, and it says unable to connect. So this weekend is our second annual Buffalo Bills Revenge Shoot 2. And last year when we did this, we rented out over 100 rooms here in Laramie. So I'm expecting that they're very happy on that. There'll be a lot of meals served. It's a 3-day event, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The range will be closed to local members for this tournament because it takes up the entire range. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Schmeckel?
Nope. Thank you.
All right. Next is Councilmember Cumbie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I just wanted to update you on the vaccine incentive project that began last spring 2021. The individuals from the city, the county, public health, University of Wyoming, Ivinson Hospital, the faith community, and members of the medical community came together to work toward incentivizing the community to increase our vaccination rates. The city generously contributed $25,000 to the effort. The county, not to be outdone by the city, contributed also another $25,000. We received money from Ivinson, and that money was managed through Evelyn at United Way. During that time, we had about 3,500 vaccinations, so it was an increase of about 10%. There's no way to know if we directly had an impact, but it did uptick, and we are the second highest vaccinated community next to Jackson in the state of Wyoming. We met recently and decided that it was time to bring that group to closure. And so we have now transitioned into developing a group that will work toward some of the monitoring techniques, especially the wastewater surveillance, which is kind of the canary in the coal mine. It's one of the first areas where you begin to see an uptick in the SARS COVID virus. And then after that, you begin sometimes to see a rise in infection and positive testing and then hospitalization. We're not quite sure how this new variant is going to act right now. Many people within the community are beginning to ask questions about, is it safe for us to gather? Can we come back into meeting in person? And they're seeking guidance on the safety issue. Vice Mayor Pierce has begun to work with me on this, and we have met with the city manager, and the city has agreed to continue wastewater surveillance testing. And Vice Mayor Pierce and I met with the acting dean, David Jones of the Health Science Center, to discuss involving individuals from the Health Science College who might offer their expertise to help us with the interpretation of the data. And then our goal is to set up a system to notify the community, and we are considering a system that would be something like fire danger warning. So when you're going into the camping or up into the forest, if it's a red day, then you know that you cannot have a fire, etc. So we are working to reorganize a smaller group that will work in a more targeted way to gather the data, interpret the data, determine the risk, and then to inform the community about the risk level using a simple kind of visual of green, yellow, red. And you can and then you can judge whether there's a higher risk in larger crowds and indoor gathering and things like that. In the East, some cities are seeing an increase in COVID infection 50 times the level within a 10 to 14 day period. And so we know it's out there, and they're trying to gather data that will help us to understand what the risk is. And we're working to continue to provide that data to the community so that people can make informed decisions rather than trying to guess which way the wind blows. So I just wanted to update you on that. And just to conclude, our total remaining in the group is $43,000. And we are hoping to use that to help support community education, possibly the testing and other things. The governor, there are grants that are currently available. We have expressed an interest in applying for these grants, but they would not be awarded until August. And so Janine Jordan has worked that into the city budget and system to provide that information. And our job, Vice Mayor Pierce and I, will be to try to gather a group and that will get that information out to the community in a simple and understandable way.
That's outstanding, and that's an excellent update for the council, because I'm not aware of anybody else undertaking that effort. I assume and hope that the county is still partnering with us when and where possible through the Albany County Public Health Office and all those other efforts, because I'm not aware of anybody else undertaking that. And I think it's vital. I think it's critical. And I think if there's one thing that's clear in an ocean of ambiguity about the state of the pandemic right now that we continue to hear over and over again, is that things have improved, but it is not over. And there's a danger in embracing an idea of it being over. So this is good, and I think is promising for trying to keep a handle on it, at least information-wise locally, especially given the fact that we just received another update about how this looks to be a very busy summer in Laramie with travel and people wanting to get out and recreate. So I think that's good timing. Vice Mayor, do you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, at this stage of the game, it's really about the science and getting the parameters set, or that algorithm defined, created, so that we know what to expect, what's coming. I mean, it's a predictive element that we are wanting to and will deploy, and I think that's what we need to do. And then after that, we just need the right communication mechanism to get that information out into the community. And what Councilor Cumby talked about was some sort of signage, poster, whatever that lets people know basically kind of what zone we happen to be in at the time. So I think that's great. I think it'll be good for the community. They can plan their activities accordingly and be as safe as possible.
Yeah, and I think having that level of detail is going to be extremely helpful. So I think that's an excellent update for us to hear about that. Yes, Councilmember Cumby.
And public health will remain involved, as well as the county, and I've already received confirmation from them. But in discussions with individuals from public health, we came to understand that their primary role is in the caretaking of our community, and it is not necessarily in conducting research and that type of guidance. So then Jane Pierce and I went to the university and
there are people in public health doing research, and we just said, we need you. It's time to step up, and they are willing to do that. And I think there could be some benefits for faculty members, publications, ability to have real life scenarios for students. So I think it could be a win-win situation for a lot of people in our community.
Absolutely. And I think as the national data starts to get a little more broad-based, it's really good to have something local that's going to be a little more detailed, a little more granular, I guess, if we want to call it that. So really great. Keep us updated on that. I have a quick update, but the city manager's been waiting an awful long time. So, oh, did you just have the hand
Mayor,
up?
that's okay. You go first.
Okay.
I just hope that I could have a moment to provide an update when you guys are all done.
You absolutely will, and of course we still have to go through the agenda too, so we're not quite there. I'll keep it very quick. There was a recent meeting of the quarterly meetings of your Civil Service Commission Council, and we received some lists of qualified candidates for the Emergency Services Dispatch as well as LPD, and there was nothing forthcoming for the fire department at that time. So the Civil Service Commission approved the lists for the qualified candidates, to move forward to the next few stages in their journey for Emergency Services Dispatch and LPD. All right, City Manager, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Council, if you will be indulgent of us over the next 6 weeks, Nancy and I were discussing earlier this week that we need to start giving you regular countdown to hosting the WHAM conference updates. And we're actually 6 weeks away, barely, and in the final planning phases for our city government to host all of the other 98 city and town governments in Wyoming. So a couple of things we wanted to share with you. First, I asked Nancy if she'd just put the schedule up to remind you of the schedule. Conference will start Wednesday, June 8th and end on Friday. Wednesday's kind of a light day with business meetings of WHAM JPIC, WHAM CAT, and the WHAM Board of Directors. The Resolutions Committee also meets that first day and reviews resolutions submitted from the membership to be forwarded on to the Board of Directors for adoption as maybe policy issues or action issues that the association will take up over the ensuing year. Also, the Leadership Training Services Committee meets, and this is the arm of WHAM that provides training for newly elected officials across the state. The social event on Wednesday, and we hope that you will all plan to attend the conference since it's kind of low-hanging fruit for us, no travel expenses for City of Laramie officials. We hope to see you at the social event. This will be at the historic Ivinson Mansion in the Alice Hardy Stevens Center, just a nice little welcoming reception to welcome folks to our community. Then Thursday is the really more intensive day. We're happy to tell you, and I was actually last week at the WHAM board meeting where the board itself was remarking about the 7 a.m. 5K Sunrise Run and Walk that's being sponsored by Tri-Hydro Corporation, and that'll be up at our Pilot Hill Recreation area. So a great chance to showcase a new recreation amenity for our community and in partnership with one of our leading employers as well. The region meetings that day, the vendor village, of course, and then we will have 3 tours that we are putting on as the host city. The first of those Thursday will be a bus tour of, I'm calling this Community Economic Development. We're planning that tour with our economic development partners, which is the Chamber Business Alliance, Main Street, and the City of Laramie. Number of education sessions that you can see there as well. There will be lunch, social hour at the Gateway Center. And then the second tour that we're putting together in the afternoon on the Monolith Ranch. And maybe we'll get to talk a little bit as well about our prospective new acquisition of water right and ranch property. Then more training in the afternoon, and Thursday night is the annual banquet, which occurs every year and where the awards are given out. We hope that we will have members of staff there. And Nancy, if you want to keep scrolling down. And then on Friday, a half day of activities with the board meeting that morning to finalize the resolutions and some other matters. And then some good informational sessions Friday morning also. The third tour will be on Friday, and we're working with the university right now to get that scheduled. I just literally noticed this evening that it's listed as a walking tour. I thought it was a more than walking tour, but in either case, we've had some initial conversations with folks at UW about focusing on some of the new facilities and amenities that are available on campus and have economic impact potential throughout not only Laramie, but the state of Wyoming. So we wanted to remind you we're 6 weeks out. The countdown is on. We hope that you'll be working with the city clerk to get registered and to attend. And one thing I wanted to tell you is if you are interested in helping, it's unclear right now what helper jobs there are, but if you would be interested in maybe like manning or womaning a table, or just acting as a greeter to give a warm welcome to people, or if you'd like to participate and assist with a tour, as Councilmember Schmeckel has offered on the campus tour, maybe just let Nancy know that you're interested, and then as we get more detail and more information figured out, we may be able to fit you in with a job so you don't have to stand around awkwardly like I would. So we're excited about it, and I know the WAM board is excited. We were supposed to be the host city in 2020, and then COVID, right? So they canceled it. We got pushed to 21, and then in 21 there were other COVID issues, so they pushed us to 22. So this has been 3 years of forever planning in the city manager's office, so we're anxious to get it done. And people love to come to our town too.
Where are the meetings going to be? I didn't see that on the schedule.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. The meetings are going to be at the Hilton Conference Center, the UW Conference Center. A few of the sessions will be in the Hilton ballrooms and stuff. We're kind of breaking them apart because we didn't have quite enough in the UW Conference Center to cover all of them. So the Hilton has agreed to let us use some of their space. And then the banquet will be held in the Gateway facility. So we'll be in the ballroom in the Gateway Center. So for the banquet.
Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, anything else for that upcoming?
No, just know that we plan to give you regular updates as we count down to hosting. So we'll do this probably weekly.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Questions, anyone? Why don't we do the agenda review for May 3rd? We'll start with consent. Questions about anything on the consent? Speaking of ongoing efforts, you'll see on there announcements, and you'll see an announcement for president at the polls and the open filing period for elected offices. And I understand that there's been a request from the county clerk's office to sort of pitch in on the effort to educate folks about the new districts and new polling places, and most importantly, probably the new laws governing voter registration and participation. City Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. I was also going to note for you that there is a change in the scheduled meetings. So when you get to that, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Okay. So there's an effort here to help get the word out about changes in our election process. And of course, we want everybody to be familiar with everything they need to be familiar with so they can successfully participate. Any other questions on consent agenda items? All right, scheduling meetings, City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. The conversation came up earlier with City Manager about May 4th. So we just wanted to point out for you that since the agenda meeting occurred, we did have that change in the schedule to ask you to go ahead and postpone the town and gown to June 28th, and then add the long range growth plan to the May 4th meeting.
Thank you, City Clerk. and we covered that a little bit in the meeting tonight, so everybody should know what we're talking about. And that makes sense. Obviously, we want to get work session topics on and go through them. Okay. Questions for the regular agenda. Starting with the carryover item from the last meeting. And then you can all see the other items. It's a relatively short agenda, but there is an executive session.
And Counselor Schuster is here. He just can't get back on. So he's just decided to watch and talk.
No problem, Counselor Schuster. Did you have something on the regular agenda?
No, just notice that we're going to have an executive session, and there's hints about two of them. One from our attorney and one from our city manager. So there might be a second one added on there.
Okay. Hints about a second one. Okay. Well, so that'll be there. Two of those topics on the regular agenda could generate discussion and questions, in my opinion, 11 and 14. And the others might be relatively short. Anything on the regular agenda? All right. Well, take a look at the upcoming meetings just to have an idea. Those are scheduled out through August.
Mayor, we are meeting tomorrow night, correct?
Yes. Yes, we are. Well, no, let me stop. We had scheduled, but did we have anything that was actually going to carry forward, City Manager? I think we might have finished enough. What was going to carry forward? Help me out.
Mayor, we had the two topics, one being budget enterprise.
Yes.
We won't do that, but we do have the remaining topic, which should be a short presentation, Council, on the community survey kickoff. I would suspect we could be done in 30 to 45 minutes at most, depending on your question.
Thank you. So the budget stuff we were able to get through tonight, but we will need to have that discussion tomorrow. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. All right. Anything else before we close our meeting? Staff, we really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. And council, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow night.